Hello, everyone. Welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are, our dear students and the EHL community, and some members outside externals of EHL community. So I see that people are slowly joining. We are here up to right now 226, and that's going up. So let me begin in a minute time when we are all here together. Okay, good. All right, so that sort of seems to continue going up. Welcome to those who are joining us. Okay. All right, so let's start. We are with around over 260 participants. So welcome everyone, and I am thrilled to be here with an amazing panel, 3 outstanding hospitality leaders joining us from California, London, and the Maldives, who will share their insights and experiences on leadership lessons from COVID-19, leading organizational resilience. So this is how we're going to proceed. We will kick off the panel with a personalized question that will enable us to understand our panelists' philosophy and vision of their company and the industry. I am not going to read the bios because you actually had them in advance. So after that, we're going to have a 45-minute discussion around 3 questions, followed by roughly 25 minutes of Q&A session open to the public. By the way, we already received questions in advance, so I hope that we'll be able to get as many questions as possible. And finally, we will conclude and close the panel. Right? So now we are up to 282. Welcome to those who are joining us. So let me start with Sonu Shivdasani. So let's start with Sonu Shivdasani. He's the founder and CEO of SONEVA Group and former founder and CEO of Six Senses and Spas. Sonu is renowned as being one of the pioneers of luxury sustainability. And for 25 years, he and his wife, Eva, have created the template for sustainable tourism and coining concepts such as slow life and intelligent luxury. Now, Sonu, you call yourself guardian of the culture, which is quite original. Could you tell us a little bit more about this concept?
Yes, certainly, Kim. So firstly, before I start, thank you so much for having me here this evening. It's a real honor. I really appreciate it. And so to answer your question, why guardian of the culture? At SONEVA, we try as much as possible to have our job titles reflect the key objective of the role. Of course, we have very, very detailed job descriptions that go on for pages, but the idea is the job title should describe the essence of the role. And so, for example, our head of operations is the guardian of the experience, because that's what we feel is essential for that. And for me, and I think for any leader, the key role is to drive behavior. And you drive behavior by creating a culture, essentially values, beliefs, a philosophy. We have a thing we call the Sun card, which is a small little booklet which has about 16 pages on it, which describes, things like the things you touched upon, whether it's slow life, intelligent luxury, inspiring a lifetime of rare experiences, our essential 12, our key values and beliefs, our top 5 goals. And so by creating that and including language is very important as well. Language drives behavior. So, for example, in our resorts, we don't have employees, we have hosts. You can imagine arriving at a remote island resort with 400 employees or associates and 400 hosts. the experience is completely different. If one considers the uniform system of accounts, which I'm sure your students would have learned at their finance session, it's designed by the American Hotel and Motel Association, and you have three principal headings. You have rooms, you have food and beverage, and then you have a department which is called MOD, minor other departments. At SONEVA and our resorts, that minor other departments is the essence of why people come here. It's the spa, it's the diving, it's the unique experiences that we create, it's the observatory, the astronomy, learning to blow glass, some of the retail things we do. It's our barefoot butlers and the experiences they create. They're all part of the life department. They're that department. And so instead of MOD, we call it life. Life is short for learning, inspiring, fun experiences as part of our slow life core purpose. So language really drives behavior, and hence guardian of the culture, because that's the key objective for me as the leader of the organization.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Sonu, for that, for sharing with us. Now let's move on to Lindsey Ueberroth. So she's our next panelist. Lindsey is the CEO of Preferred Hotels and Resorts, the world's largest independent hotel brand, representing 700 distinctive hotels, resorts, residences, and unique hotel groups across 80 countries. Lindsey is recognized as one of the most influential women in hospitality and is one of the very few female CEOs in our industry. So a true role model for all our female participants today. Now, Lindsey, you were born into the travel industry, and so your motto is believe in travel, which fits your life experience. Could you share with us more about this, believe in travel?
Absolutely. Well, hello from California. It's a pleasure to be a part of this awesome panel and participate here. Yeah, when Kim says I was born into travel, I joke, but not so much. My mom was a flight attendant, flying with TWA, an airline that doesn't even exist anymore. And so she traveled with me until she was very pregnant. So I say I was literally born into the travel industry. My parents were always in travel. But I'll tell you, when I was a student, I didn't know that this was the industry that I would be in. I grew up traveling. That was what we did for all of our vacations. I laugh now because we didn't always go visit, the traditional sites of churches and museums. We'd go visit hotels. That was something fun that my family would do. So little did I know that was the path that I was going to be in. So when I say believe in travel, that was something innate that was taught to me at a very, very young age. And as I look at the world now, Sonu was talking about sort of the cultural values and norms, and most companies do have mission statements. Well, we decided to create something that we call our ideology, and it's really what guides and shapes the kind of the foundation of our company. And it starts with we believe in travel, and at the core, we believe that if everybody had access to travel, if everybody had the ability to get on an airplane and go to different places, that I think a lot of the problems that we face in this world wouldn't exist. It creates, a sense of knowledge, of understanding. When you get to connect with other people and cultures and have that experience, you realize at the core that we're all the same. We're all human beings. We all have very shared life experiences, and that's why I believe that travel has the power to change people and the connectedness to it. So our manifesto, and I'll read it to you, and really this is really what guides me as a leader. It is what we have definitely leaned on as we've gone through this pandemic. And it's something that when I'm struggling with a lot of things, I go back to this. And each week we actually interview an associate in our company, and we ask them which line of the ideology most resonates with them, and then we kind of probe into that. So it says our ideology is we believe in travel. We're committed listeners and deliberate storytellers in hospitality. We care. We nurture independence, and we celebrate individuality. Family values inspire us. We believe change creates opportunity. We engineer potential. We foster trust, and we co-create brighter futures. We are forever curious. We believe the business of hospitality is borderless. And with the pineapple, that's our logo, as our global guide, we are proudly preferred. So this ideology, as you can tell, you take little pieces of it. That's really what, like I said, has been my guidepost. It's really what we really foster throughout the organization, and they're all great things. And change creates opportunity. That was a big piece of what we leaned on this year, in addition to the piece of we care. I think that was an important thing that got us through the last 15 months. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsey. And now let me present you Filip Boyen, who is the CEO of a prestigious FORBES travel guide, which offers travelers the only independently rated collection of luxury hotels, restaurants, and spas. Filip started his career as a commis chef and has risen through the ranks across companies and borders. So now he counts with a luxury hospitality career spanning over 30 years. Filip, your keyword is excellence in service. Can you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Sowon, for letting me be here and inviting me with two very good friends of mine, Lindsey and Sonu, and two top professionals in the industry. So I'm really delighted to be here. So at FORBES Travel Guide, we've been rating and evaluating the best hotels in the world since 1958. In those days, it was called the Mobile Travel Guide, and since 12 years, it's called the FORBES Travel Guide. So basically what we do, we verify luxury. But what does that really mean? To me, that means that we champion, we support, and we celebrate all those with a passion for extraordinary service, right? It's not very complicated. So we rate every year about 2,000 hotels, restaurants, and spas in about 80 countries around the world. And what is unique about us is that 75% of our 900 standards that we evaluate everywhere are based on emotional aspects of service. And what do I mean by emotional aspects of service? Let me give you one little example. If we check the coffee that is served to you in the morning for breakfast, we are not so focused on the timing. For us, it can be 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes. It's not the essential part. What is important is how this coffee is served. Was there eye contact? Was there interaction between the waiter and the guest? Was there a big smile? Did the guest feel welcome? So that, for me, are the emotional aspects, because at the end of the day, what counts is how does a hotel make their guests feel? That's what counts, right? And because we do focus so much on the emotional aspect of service, being a 5-star Forbes hotel is a very exclusive club around the world. Currently, we have 282 hotels around the world that have earned the 5-star rating. Obviously, ratings are not for sale. They have to be earned. Our inspectors book, stay, and pay like every normal guest. So the hotel does not know when or that the inspector has even been there to evaluate them, right? So we are very ambitious, and our biggest ambition is that one day everyone will be in a position to experience genuine 5-star service everywhere, every day.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so thank you very much for those introductions, and really that points out the uniqueness of course, your company and the way that you perceive industry, hospitality industry. So now I'm going to go ahead with my first question, and this is the following. As quarantine measures soften and people get vaccinated and hotels reopen, the hospitality, travel, and leisure industry is on its way to recovery from the pandemic. So what are the 2 to 3 key leadership lessons that you learned from COVID-19 that you did not pay much attention before or was not that important pre-COVID? And how have these lessons been embedded concretely in your daily life, in the way that you lead, manage operations, lead people, work with stakeholders? And what have been the results if any, in the overall recovery process? So it's actually one question with a few questions. Who would like to go ahead?
Who wants to go first? Filip or Lindsey? Shall I go
Please.
ahead?
Yeah.
Good.
Please.
So I think the learnings from this should be clubbed with learnings from any crisis. I've gone through many crises in my life, and I think the first thing is looking at things with a positive frame of mind. It was so easy in this crisis and other crises to go into a bit of a tailspin. I like the words of Lao Tzu, this idea of good fortune has its roots in disaster. I like, to touch further on Chinese wisdom, the Chinese word for crisis is two characters. One represents danger and the other change and opportunity. So I think if one can start off a crisis with a positive frame of mind, it just helps so much to the outcome. And I think that's very relevant to this crisis and relevant to other crises as well. And I think generally in daily lives, if one wakes up in the morning and one sets oneself with a positive frame of mind, you're going to achieve a lot. And I talked about being the guardian of the culture. I believe also the leader should really energize our team. We should turn the light bulb on when we walk into a room. And I think in a crisis, that's all the more important. And it's important every day, not just in a crisis. So I think that's something I've learned from the many crises, is having this positive frame of mind. The other thing is the need to research extensively. I suffered from a serious health crisis back in the end of 2018. And in that particular case, the doctor said, I'm going to hospitalize you tomorrow and you'll be hospitalized for a month and you won't be able to travel for 6 months. I took 3 weeks off. I extended and I researched extensively. I consulted about 20 people who'd survived from cancer. I spoke with 3 separate oncologists. So I think in a crisis, one should consider how much time one really has to make a decision. Quite often there's a pressure to rush. So I, in that particular case, had stage 4 cancer, and the doctor wanted to treat me the next morning because he felt it was critical. But I really did have 3 weeks to make a decision. So I think this thing about consulting extensively, taking one's time, taking as long as one really can to make a decision. Don't procrastinate, but just work out how much time you have, what the clock is, put the timer on, the stopwatch on, and then start consulting. In this particular case, we consulted 6 different infectious disease experts before we finalized our policy and our approach. Our learnings from that made us realize that we could create our own destiny here on our islands. We're fortunate that all 3 resorts are one island, one resort. The Maldives itself, where 2 of our resorts exist now, are 1,200 isolation centers. So we tested extensively on arrival. We actually set up our own laboratory. We got the permission, we brought the equipment in, and we now have a capacity of testing 1,500 people a day. We're also offering free tests to the government. So that allows us to test everyone, create a COVID-free environment, which is not just, so SONEVA is not just no news, no shoes, but it's also now no masks. So I think by consulting extensively, our policies towards hosts wearing masks, this thing about separation of tables, etc., helped us a lot. We realized that there are very few cases of asymptomatic people catching COVID from other asymptomatic people in the open air. We know that in our environment, in the Maldives and in Thailand where we operate, where the temperature is 80 degrees centigrade and the humidity levels are up to 80% as well, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity levels are above that as well, the half-life of the virus, according to the United States Center of Biodefense, is only an hour. So when you think about COVID practices, all you need to do is just open the window for an hour, ensure that your guests are in the open air, and then obviously test extensively and research extensively on immune boosting foods as well. I realized as well that one's health is very much in one's mind. And there are also natural alternatives to the traditional medical alternative. So we've had incredible results where 400 of our guests, employees, and construction workers have tested positive. We've given them the andrographis paniculata, and they've de-isolated within a week. Within a week, they've tested from positive to negative, and fortunately, we've had no fatalities. So researching extensively, so adopting a positive attitude and a mindset with a crisis and in every day, researching extensively in everything you do, and determining exactly how much time you really have to research, and then communicating extensively. That's always very important in a crisis, and that just hasn't stopped. Whether it was weekly films, we're very lucky to have digital storytellers at our properties. So a short film from our filmmakers, where I'd update them on a weekly basis, our team, on where we were and how things were progressing. And then CEO Connect, we normally do that once a quarter in good times. In a crisis, it became once every 2 weeks. So I think those are the 3 key learnings.
All right. Thank you. Excellent.
Lindsey, you want to go first?
Sure. Okay, happy to do that. You know, I don't know that the leadership kind of, like the key leadership values that I had changed. I think they were amplified during this situation, and I think that there was really kind of 3 key things. One is, as Sonu just said, communication. I learned you can never over communicate in a crisis, and we went from I used to do quarterly What's updates with our associates, and I had regular communication with hoteliers, and that transitioned very quickly to weekly live video conferences with our global team. A lot of transparency, because the reality is we learned very quickly as leaders that we have been through crisis, but we've never been through this. And the one thing that I learned very quickly is that it didn't matter what decision we made, that it could change 24 hours later. You know, what I thought was going to be a 90-day crisis has turned into a 15-month crisis. So the ability to communicate frequently, communicate very candidly, and to be comfortable telling people that we didn't know all the answers, and that the reality was we were making the best decision that we could based on the information we had at the time, and that change was inevitable. That was the other thing. So when we say change creates opportunity, that was something that we had to embrace, was that, you know, change was going to happen. We were going to have to lean into that, and be positive about it. You know, we were always constantly looking at what was going to be the upside of that in a very, very difficult time. Empathy, that was another important thing. And as we all now sit and we look into everybody's homes with the advent of technology, you got to know people's personal lives on a different level. You know, you've got kids coming in and dogs barking, and you know, you were getting to know people on a personal level. And as this went on longer and longer and longer, to me, it became very important to balance not only the professional stress that was being put on our associates, but also the personal stress that was being put on people. And the empathy part became really, really important. And I think we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but I think that there is a lot of emotional and mental stress that we've all had to weather. And as leaders, it was important to acknowledge that and to make people feel comfortable to talk about it, because this was something new to all of us. And I think we started doing these, we called them roundtables, because we realized people were isolated and they were used to being in an office environment and meeting with clients. And so we would host these roundtables. Anybody from the globe could call in, and we were different executives. And I learned all sorts of interesting things about people, what they were doing with their time. We started doing this with our hotel partners as well. And that created a new type of relationship with our partners that I think on the flip side of this, and as we recover, has created a much stronger relationship, because as I said, you're now talking to your hotel partners not just about business. It was just about what was going on in general, what was on their minds. And that level of empathy worked internally as well as externally. And then I think the second part I always think is important is to have a sense of humor, because I say we're lucky that we're in a beautiful industry, and we've been hard hit, but we're gonna go through a renaissance that we're going to be in one of the best industries to be in as we recover. And I think on the darkest days and days when you just thought this would never end, I think having a sense of humor is always just a critical piece of being a leader. And I don't mean that in a flippant sense. I don't mean it in a corny sense, but just, you know, kind of the elevating the mood, making sure that you can always turn something around. So those are three things that I've always had, but I think, like I said, they were just amplified in making sure that everybody felt that they were seen, recognized, and that we're all human. You know, I think, you know, as leaders, we have to recognize that we're human too, and that it's okay to show people that side of you.
Thank you, Lindsey. Thank you.
Philip?
Filip.
Yeah, for me, the first one is gratitude, and not only for still having a job, and our good health, of course, but also for the little things of every day. The perfect coffee in the morning, a great home-cooked meal, comfortable bed, but above all, my appreciation for colleagues, loved ones, and friends. I thought that was something that I really learned during COVID. The second one, more from a work perspective, was obviously total focus on customers. So for us, revenue streams absolutely came to a standstill in 2020. So we decided as a team to focus all our efforts on strengthening the loyalty that we had built over the years with our clients and on maximizing our support to the industry. So we, of course, stopped official ratings because they would have been meaningless with hotels closed or some of the hotels partly open on skeleton staff, etc. And of course, our inspectors and trainers simply could not travel around the world. So we started our Hospitality Strong webinars in April of last year with the intention to keep furloughed employees engaged with the industry. And that series of free training webinars reached about 140,000 listeners worldwide. We converted all our training modules to virtual, of course. We created best practices focused on the delivery of exceptional service, even under COVID restrictions. And then we did regular surveys, and over 500 hotels used to take part. And they updated everyone around the world about what was going on in different parts of the world, what were the new restrictions, etc., etc. And the third one for me is resilience. I, of course, had to find a balance between empathy and concern for the employees, but at the same time, I'm being paid to safeguard the future of our business. And as you know, hope is not a strategy. So the capacity people have in dealing with adversity never stops to amaze me. Everyone in our much leaner team was a shining example of resilience. We changed our mindset from being in trouble to getting out of trouble. We looked at this challenging time as a catalyst for change and growth. The whole team bonded together. We had to adapt daily. We encountered many constraints, but together we came up with creative solutions. Of course, we use technology to sustain and strengthen our relationships. And we realized more than ever how much we really depend on each other. And then, like Sonu and Lindsey already said, communication was the key issue during this COVID situation. And we had very regular updates with the employees, with customers. And what was important is full transparency and honesty. I have always believed that people need to know where they stand, and it will be much more easy for them to accept certain decisions if they know why and what the circumstances were. So at the end, I leave it to you to decide why our incredible team at Forbes Travel Guide was so successful during this very challenging time. But I wonder, could it be possibly because we have 68% of our employees that are women? Back to you. So what? So then you asked as well what was the result of these changes, right? And what have you? So gratefulness, I thought, was very important because it's, of course, a very different emotion than frustration or resentment. And it's created a much more serene and productive working environment. What we have done to support the industry, to build loyalty, simply said, we have now more partners, hotel partners, spa partners than we had in 2019. So my team has done a remarkable job there. And then resilience and creativity. What we did was to get the world traveling again, or to help to get the world traveling again. We created the Health Security Verified by ShareCare and Forbes Travel Guide, which is basically a badge that hotels can earn. And the health security platform basically amplifies the hard work that they have already done implementing their health and safety protocols. So once you earn the badge, consumers, travel advisors can see that it's absolutely safe to send their clients to those hotels. For example, we have, to date, we have over 1,000 hotels that are on the platform. We have a couple of hundred restaurants. And we also have destinations like Los Cabos and Los Angeles that have adopted the Health Security Verified platform for all their hotels. And now we are expanding further into cruise ships and sports arenas. So that was one of the things that, one of the creative achievements that came out of the resilience part. And that's all. Back to you, Sowon.
Thank you. Amazing. Thank you. So it seems that communication is from the three of you. Then we have a positive mindset, intensive research and the knowledge, empathy, sense of humor, gratitude, total customer focused, and resilience. That's a lot.
You forgot one thing. What about a majority should be women?
Very good. I like this panel. Didn't I say that you're amazing?
I do too.
Obviously.
Too bad we're not all together.
All right.
I agree with you more, Lindsey, about a sense of humor. I agree. It's always great to have a sense of humor, and I think gratitude, as you say, Filip, it's just so, it completely changes your mindset. If you're grateful for something, it sort of releases different types of chemicals in the brain to, and you can't be frustrated or worried anymore. So it's a very fantastic, it's a very powerful thought mechanism. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
I agree.
And they go hand in hand. I mean, this positive mindset and the sense of humor and empathy and gratitude, I mean, they all go hand in hand. So thank you.
You know,
all right, so let's move.
The sense of humor, like Lindsey said, and Sonu as well, it energizes people, right? And I always have a sense of humor. I can't go through a day without cracking a few jokes, without having a, and Lindsey knows that very well.
I do know that very well.
When we are together, we always have a great laugh, right? And that's important.
Yeah, it gets oxygen in your lungs when you're laughing.
Absolutely. But like you said, Lindsey, you need to amplify that during a situation like that. Everybody has anxiety. There is no two ways about it, in different levels, right? And the more you can disarm that, and the more you can reduce that, and the more you can make them feel comfortable and safe, the better life will be, right?
Yes.
But it's a really important issue. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so happy to hear this from our industry leaders about being human and sense of humor and empathy and all that. Thank you. So let's go into the second question. So by now we have heard about a zillion times to adapt to the new normal, and that our industry will not be the same as before, with accelerated digitalization, a greater demand for customization, and a real need for sustainable and resilient business models. So we often focus on the should, we should do this, we should do that. Easier said than done, given the fact that hotels worldwide are struggling to stay afloat. So there seems to be a substantial gap between the theoretical should and the what is the reality, in the industry. So can we close the gap? How can we close the gap? What does the industry need to change, target, focus first as to trigger further feasible changes that will shape the future of hospitality, and how to achieve this change?
Thank you. So shall I lead as usual? Is that right?
Absolutely.
Great.
Sure, I'll try and be a bit quick. I know my last answer was a bit long. I apologize. So, yeah, I think the big challenge we have is a lack of focus, and there's just too much emphasis on growth. So if you consider the top sort of 5 or 6 hotel companies in the world, whether it's Marriott or IHG or Hyatt, and all the different brands, etc., they're all publicly owned. So they're publicly quoted companies. There's a lot of focus on shareholders, satisfying shareholders, quarterly results, and there's a terrible emphasis on growth, so quantity rather than quality. And the focus is on the number of new hotels you add into your portfolio. So having run a business that was growing based on managing other people's hotels, because that's the other thing. One is one's publicly owned, and then secondly, one's not the owner of these hotels. One owns the brands, but one franchises out the brands or gives the brands away on management agreements. And the owners of these assets are various institutions, whether it's a sovereign wealth fund, a PE firm, a listed company. Their main focus and emphasis on maximizing shareholder returns, not on evolving on the brand, and they don't have a beliefs, a philosophy, and a purpose. And I think that's one of the challenges, because when you're the CEO of a company whose objective is to grow with more management agreements, all you're trying to do is you're going to hotel conferences to meet new owners. You're discussing with owners their budgets, their annual budgets and reviews. You're trying to manage compromises between what the owner wants and your own philosophy, values, and standards. So there's no time to really evolve, think, either develop yourself personally. You have very little time in the day to do that because you're just so flat out in terms of developing yourself as an individual. And I think as leaders, we need to develop ourselves because the half-life of learning, as we know, what we'll learn at EHL will most probably be 50% of it will be redundant in about 5 to 10 years because of how the world evolves. And so we need to continuously evolve and learn as individuals as well as organizations. But the challenge which a lot of the large hotel companies have is that their focus is just on adding units. And so that's the emphasis. So it's an issue of focus. And I think if one focused on quality and of evolution, and if it was more about enhancing performance through quality rather than number of units, it may be we might be able to achieve what we should be doing rather than always talking about should be.
And how could we achieve actually that change?
I think we need to think about the market and re-educate the market on a different emphasis of value. Of course, in the short term, it may not look good, but in the long term, you create a lot of value for the brand. And over time, you start to distinguish yourself. And it's a bit like the tortoise and the hare. At some point, you eventually start to exponentially evolve and improve.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Sonu.
Am I up? We're going in order here. Okay. So I have to admit, I was a little bit perplexed by this question. So I'll take a stab at what I thought were two areas that I think you talk about the theoretical versus the reality, and it's interesting because I think there's sort of two crises. We're coming out of a crisis, and I think there's two other kind of interesting things. I think we're about to, as an industry, we need to close the gap on what I believe is going to be a talent war. I think the hospitality industry is one of, like I said, it's an industry we all love. It's why those of us on the panel are here. It's why all of you are going to EHL. But I think the hospitality industry, especially as we've gone through this crisis, has lost a lot of talent. I think people have gone to other industries. I think in the past, I'd be curious, those on the panel, I think a lot when I was talking to students, a lot wanted to go into the deal side of it, not the operations side of it. I think that the industry from an operations standpoint was perceived as one that lacked balance. And I think that what's happened during this crisis is the skill set has changed. It's forced us all to change. Technology was thrust upon us. The hospitality industry wasn't always perceived as a tech-focused industry, and we've all had to learn to adapt. It's something that I think there's a lot of good that's come out of it. I think there's technology that's now been implemented that is giving the guests a lot more choice and a lot more of that customization that they want. But at the same time, we have to balance that service aspect that Filip and Sonu talk about. It's a very personal industry, but I think the gap that needs to close is, are we going to make sure that we groom the talent are we going to have that talent to really do the things that we need to do as an industry? So I think that's why all of you at EHL play a really important role. And I think as leaders in the industry, we have to do a better job of making sure that we really position hospitality as a real career, especially on the operations side. I think that as leaders, we've all had to learn how to create balance for the people that work for us, so that it is perceived as a thriving industry. The flip side, I think the other area is sustainability. I think that we all want to be more sustainable. I think that the last 15 months have thrust upon us the importance of not only health and wellness and sustainability, but community. What do communities mean to you? What are you doing in your own backyards? How do you foster community and take care of those people? How do you celebrate your destination, the heritage of it? And I think that the industry still has great strides to make in that. It's really, in my belief, that sustainable tourism, we have to foster all three of these pillars, and we have to do it across the supply chain. So it's not just in the hotel space. It's countries have to want to believe in this. The airline industry, the cruise industry, the destination management companies, everybody has to focus on this as a real priority for us to be, as I said, an industry that's going to continue to thrive. Because the one thing that we all learned during this was hospitality is a big driver of the economy. And when this was thrust upon us, that came to a standstill. And so those are two gaps that I believe are upon us. And I think that that's why I'm thrilled that we have so many students here, because you're the future. You're the ones that are going to help us figure out how to resolve that. And as leaders, I think that we all really need to link arms and focus on these two areas. So I don't know if that was a question you wanted to answer, but that's what I'm throwing out there.
It was definitely a great answer. And Sonu, I can't agree more. Growth through quality is music to my ears, right? That's a great concept. And Lindsey, I think it's really important, responsible travel. I think the new travelers are going to be much more responsible. They're also going to be a lot more curious, right? They're also going to look for new destinations. They want to explore off the beaten track destinations. But I think what's really important is, you mentioned community there, is going to be the impact that you make as a hotel on the community. And especially the guest will want to know, what is the impact that my stay makes on the community, right? In terms of the support hotel gives to the community, etc. Sustainability. I mean, sustainability now, it's a concept that we've discussed for years, but it is a must now, right? I always say it's a little bit like Patek Philippe, the famous Swiss watchmaker, who says we are not just looking after our destinations, we are preserving them for the next generations, right? And I think that's important. I understood this question a little bit from a technology point of view. So, and I'll speak to it from a luxury point of view. And Lindsey has mentioned a few things there already. So I think in our world of luxury hotels, high touch will always win over high tech, right? And why is that? Because I feel there is no technology, and there will never be technology, that can replace the wonderful emotion of experiencing extraordinary service and how a hotel makes their guest feel, right? How would technology record that? How would technology define that? And how would technology experience it, right? So like Lindsey says, I think the key is to find the right balance between the all-important human interaction and technology. And where technology can be really useful is helping to create that personalized service and guest experience, right? Aman, for example, says that their customers arrive as guests and they leave as friends. Okay, So if your return guests are friends, then we should know all about our friends. And listen, if our friends, we know all about our friends, right? We know what they like, we know what they dislike, and we know their preferences. And here is where technology can be very useful. Also sharing information, communicating with guests and employees, apps, chatbots, etc. Because today's guests, they want to interact instantly. And they want mobility, flexibility, and for services to come to them. What I do struggle with is the statement of some technology companies when they say that they aim to provide exceptional experiences for guests and employees. What does that mean exactly? I feel you need much more than data to achieve an extraordinary experience. Accor, for example, they are creating an ecosystem whereby they provide services well beyond accommodation, even transportation and financial services. They want to accompany their loyalty members and provide for every need every day. Ambitious, I would say, but incredibly powerful if they would pull it off. At Forbes Travel Guide, we say that if we make our guests think or work harder, luxury vanishes. And the purpose, in my eyes, of any new technology system should be to resolve a challenge, number one, to make the guest's life easier. And number three, it should benefit the employees as well. And what we have learned from already very busy resort and country house hotels in the US especially and the UK is that their guests expect and demand to be pampered and cared for. COVID is not an excuse for inferior service, especially now that the average daily rates in those hotels are substantially higher than in 2019. So use technology to get to know your guests better so you can surprise them with unexpected and impactful touches, because it's the little things that create extraordinary service and that separate the great from the good hotels. Back to you.
Right. Thank you. Now, here's my last question of today before we open it to the public. Under questions, it's already 4:50. Time flies with this enriching panel. You're all very successful with successful careers and successful companies, and I am truly honored to have you here. Having said this, Rome wasn't built in one day, and I am a firm believer that success entails a lot of hard work, pain, mistakes, and failures. Yet we tend to focus on the bright outcome, but I think there's tremendous value in learning from a leader's sometimes painful and maybe lonesome journey. Would you be willing to share with us the worst decisions that you made and or toughest moments in your professional experience that retrospectively contributed to your current success? How do you bounce back from such low points and nurture your individual and organizational resilience?
Good. Shall I start again?
Yes.
So I think, as I touched upon, in answering the first question, I've been through many crises in my life, and I think let me answer the first thing. What was one of the worst decisions I made, and then how I developed resilience as a result of it and bounced back. So just on the first question, I think a bad decision was to start managing other people's hotels. We were quite young when we opened SONEVA Pushi here. I was 30. We started winning lots of awards. People would approach us to manage their hotels, and so it just grew and evolved like that. And I think at first it was quite exciting traveling around the world, seeing new destinations, etc. But as I mentioned earlier, as we started to grow, that feeling of success wasn't really there. I started to feel more and more hollow because I was being dragged away from what I felt was my job, which is to evolve and create, whether it's a new dining concept or a new resort or concept or just a new host engagement, a standard that will drive more host engagement or a best practice. Instead, spending time just dealing with owners, growing the business, cookie cuttering, and just hoping that the next property would be as good as the last, rather than considerably evolved and improved. So that became quite frustrating, this idea of managing other people's hotels. And then we broke, we sold Six Senses back in 2012 and sort of broke the link between SONEVA and Six Senses. I think another mistake was to club the brands together. So at one point we thought, It should be SONEVA Fushi by Six Senses, SONEVA Gilly by Six Senses, etc. Everson by Six Senses. I think that was a mistake. The brands should have had their own identity. And so it was a tough time. But I think now we're sort of stronger than ever, being having learned from that experience. You know, we've learned a lot. We came across some amazing people, some great talent. I went to amazing destinations, but I've sort of now been enriched by that experience. And I think the crises that we've been through as well as, and I have been through, has helped me. When I studied A-levels, I read a French author, and he wrote describing 19th century Europe. He said, La paix, c'est l'intervalle entre les deux guerres. You know, peace is the gap in between two wars. And that was 19th century Europe. And in a way, 21st century travel and tourism, especially in Asia, has been similar. You know, the good times have been the gaps in between crises, whether it started this century started with 9/11 in 2001, and then we had SARS, and then the Asian tsunami, and then the bird flu, and then the global financial crisis, and so on. And so I think, and we've also had some personal crises at our business. In '98, we had a great fire here, which closed down our plant rooms. We had no power, no electricity. We were told that it would take 6 months to rebuild. And we sort of didn't accept that. We didn't take no for an answer. And we decided to see what we could do. I called up suppliers. They reallocated equipment from other hotels that they were sending it to. We hired an Antonov from Singapore. We got spare parts, labor from other groups, and we opened 29 days later after the tsunami again. It was 3 months, 2 weeks after the tsunami. Our buildings were wood, especially at SONEVA Gilly on the East Coast. The 4 of the villas, the jetties disappeared. We were told it would take at least a year to rebuild. 2 weeks later, this Qantas comes from New Zealand. That's where we buy the wood, because we want to show that you can create a beautiful aesthetic by not using tropical hardwood. So our woods are normally from reforestation programs and plantations. So we use a lot of cedar and pine. And so this Qantas arrived in Mali Airport, nose opened up, all our wood arrived, something that normally would have taken 4 or 5 months, 6 weeks to procure, and then another 2 months of shipping. The supplier was very kind. He was very sympathetic. Everyone was, as they always are in a crisis. And he got his clients to allocate their orders to us and delay their own orders. So I think these crises have sort of helped me, and I think that in some ways, human beings, we resemble the coastline. It's the storms, and organizations as well. It's the storms that define and shape us, and in a way, it's how we react to those storms that lead to our future success. So I think Lindsey said, I missed the, what did she, yes. I've lost that point, but Lindsey said something that rang true with that particular point. But yes, so I think that's, in summary, some thoughts there.
Thank you, Sonu.
Okay. You're right. Rome was not built in a day. Leaders are certainly not built in a day. And I said there would be probably a very long list of tough decisions or mistakes that I've made along the way. Clearly, one of the toughest decisions I've ever had to face as a leader was back in April, when we had to make decisions about our team, about laying off and furloughing people. And just a lonely day that I still get emotional about. But I think if I were to think about, the biggest mistakes I've made were always around people. And so I say that as, I belong to an organization called YPO. It's a group of presidents and CEOs, and they have this philosophy, which is, if you have a piece of advice to share, you have a story behind it, because advice comes from experience, right? You've lived a story, so tell the story, don't give the advice. And the story I would tell is, I've learned over time when I say the biggest mistakes I've made about people, is you'll learn this as a leader that the people you surround yourself with is really the most critical piece of any leader in any organization. And early on in my career as a leader, I think I felt that I had to have all the answers. I had to make all the decisions. You know, and that's a mistake. That's definitely a mistake, because we never have all the answers, and we certainly shouldn't be making all the decisions by ourselves. I've also learned that you've heard the phrase hire slow, fire fast. That, you know, the people you bring into your organization, the people you surround yourself with, that's critical. And one of the most damaging things that can be done is to allow somebody who's eroding your culture. So somebody who isn't acting in the best interest of your company, or is toxic and is hurting your team. And I've been in the position where people say, but they're top performer in sales, you know, and the worst thing that you can do is ignore somebody who is hurting your organization, who is toxic, and pretend that it's okay because they're driving revenue, or they're creating value in some other way. And so when I look back, you know, the times where I've let something go on longer than it should, I regret so deeply, because I look at the impact that's had on teams in the organization. And that's something I've learned so much. And then, you know, during this pandemic, when I say that the people you surround yourself with, I can't imagine. I mean, when I look back on my executive team and the hours that we spent making decisions, you know, these people, you know, were the pillar and the backbone. And I sometimes think, you know, I might be the face, but they're really the ones that are you know, really driving the organization. So I think that's where I look back as an individual and as a leader, the support that I've gotten from the people I surround myself with, and that's what gives me resilience every day. I get up every day with gratitude, as Filip has talked about, an appreciation for the people who allow me to serve in this capacity, who trust me, and allow us to run a great company, but to be a part of an amazing industry.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsey.
I'll put my tissue away now, Lindsey, because that was
I know, I was trying not to get emotional there. But
that was very emotional, because
no, but I must say I completely agree with what you say, Lindsey, about alpha males and toxic people. You couldn't be more right. The worst thing you can have is have someone in an organization like that. It completely destroys one person, can destroy a bond between 8 other people. It's really very toxic. And
that's a very strong point, Lindsey, and I completely agree with you. Always the harder decisions are the decisions around people, right? Because you always have this feeling that you're letting them down. And these are people that you chose, you brought them into the company, you are there, you feel responsible, you are there to care for them, right? And then when the moment comes, it is indeed very emotional. But anyway, Sowon, I don't think we have enough time to go through all the wrong decisions and boo-boos that I have made, right, in my career. Because you said very nicely on the top of the call that I was 30 years in the industry. It's actually 40, right? Oh. So like Sonu, I have seen, and I'm not pretending I'm as old, as young as Sonu, but we've gone through a lot of crises, right? And starting, I remember I was in Antalya in Turkey when the first Gulf War broke out, and we had to fire in one day 380 people, right? The hotel went from 98% occupancy to 1% in one day, right? When the Gulf War started. So that was one. I've had all sorts of things. I was in Moscow when Gorbachev and Yeltsin were the presidents. There was mafia wars and territory wars. I was in Bora Bora. We had 2 cyclones in 1 week, and the hotel was practically completely destroyed. And like Lindsey says, a sense of humor, even in crisis, is important. So a tiny little story of Bora Bora. We had 70 overwater bungalows. And practically all those bungalows were destroyed or lifted off their pillars in their entirety. And they drifted, we were on a private island, and they drifted to the main island. So the next morning I get a call from a colleague, a good friend, general manager of a hotel, not so nice hotel, I must say. And he says to me, Filip, I have 2 of your bungalows on my beach. And I say to him, Pierre, why don't you keep him? Why don't you keep them? You never had luxury accommodations. But anyway, let's get serious. Let's get serious. So what I have always regretted is my decision not to go to university when I was 18, right? So I started as a commis chef at that age. I worked my way up through the ranks. Basically, I always say I took the long road to University of Life, right? But I have to assure you that I had a fantastic time doing it. That you can be sure. So my journey took me to 9 countries, 6 different companies, and taught me that hard work, commitment, and passion for our incredible industry are important, of course. But my biggest lesson was that hospitality is and always will be about people, right? And that without our teams, we are absolutely nobody. So it taught me the importance of understanding and respecting the colleagues that deliver the incredible service and unique experiences to our guests every single day. The room attendants, the receptionists, the dishwashers, the chefs, the barmen, etc., etc. And I think it is so important in our industry that we take the time to realize what they do, learn what they do, learn how they do it, because otherwise, how are we going to lead them and understand what makes them tick in the long run? So, of course, I feel I could have achieved more, and I could certainly have progressed easier and faster through the ranks if I was equipped with a sound education. But you know, in the end, I still sort of got there. So now one point that Lindsey made, which I think is incredibly important, is the labor crisis that is currently going on in the US, especially, and in Europe. Just to give you an example, I'm in London. I spoke last week with about 8 or 9 of the GMs of the top luxury hotels. They feel that 25 to 30% of the hospitality workers have simply disappeared. So half of that they feel have gone back to their home country because of Brexit and COVID, and half of that is totally disillusioned with the industry and wants to go in a different direction. In America, the situation is so bad that in a lot of hotels, they're already offering sign-up bonuses of $1,000 for rank and file staff. It is really, really, really difficult for the moment. And I don't think that's going to resolve itself in the short term. So I have only one message to all the bright and ambitious students here, because I know from Sowon that you are all graduating very soon. My message to you is give hospitality a chance, right? I know that your education is preparing you for business, for the business world. You will have obviously many options when you graduate. But what I can tell you is that there is no industry as exciting and as rewarding than ours, right? The people you will meet, the cultures you will discover, the experiences you will enjoy, they're going to shape you not only as a successful professional, but more importantly, as a person as well. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you, Filip. And on that note, thank you. Thank you for that hopeful note for our students. And on that note, I would like to open it to the public. I already have a few questions that came in just now and also from before. So we have about a few minutes to do that. So let me kick it off. Based on the assumption that for some time tourism will be local or regional, how long do you think it will take until Europeans are traveling out of Europe, in particular to destinations like I mentioned Southeast Asia? And what do you recommend hotels and resorts to do to send a message to consumers that the hotel resort is safe? Any one of you? Yeah.
Lindsey, women first.
Hold on, let me go get my crystal ball. I'll be right back.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a great question, and I think when I say crystal ball, I say that with sincerity, in the sense of that the biggest challenge is going to be, it's not that people don't want to travel, and I think our industry and hotels, I think, have done an incredible job of communicating what they're doing from a health and safety standpoint. And as Filip talked about, the programs that companies like Forbes have put in place, I think are helping the traveler feel safe when they travel. It's just countries getting their acts together to find a way to make it easy to travel. And that's the real challenge right now, is that there's so much inconsistency and it keeps changing. Airlines have different policies, countries have different policies. I've even heard that the challenge is you can now go to parts of Europe, but heaven forbid you're in transit and there's a new rule around, the testing policies that they're in transit. So I'm a forever optimist. I believe that everything is going to happen and recover faster than these forecasts. I believe everybody who's writing forecasts that we're going to recover in 2025 are people that buy and sell hotels. It behooves them to make it sound like the recovery is going to be slow. The reality is so we're in an incredible industry. People want to travel. This concept of a bucket list has gone completely away because people realize life is short. Freedom was taken from them. They want to travel. Personally, from a business standpoint, people need to connect. They want to reconnect. The real challenge is going to be, can governments figure out an easy way for the traveler to go from point A to point B? I would like to believe that that's going to happen within the next six months. It could happen sooner. It could happen longer. My crystal ball is a little cloudy today, but I remain optimistic. I don't know, Sonu, Filip, what's your crystal ball say today?
Well, my crystal ball is already, the garbage man came this morning and took him. So, because I've been wrong so many times about this that, but anyway, Lindsey, I think the key here is vaccinations. In the UK, 40% now of the population has been vaccinated twice, so that's good. I think the US is pretty similar to that. And then and now we have the variants, right? And there is simply not enough data available for governments to evaluate how effective the vaccinations are against the Indian variant. That's the last one. I mean, I was supposed to go to France on the 3rd of June, and yesterday France says 7 days quarantine for all the UK visitors, right? So I think once we get into a situation where countries are up to 70-75% of the population vaccinated, we are in a much better position. And I agree with you, Lindsey. It's not a question that people don't want to travel. People are desperate to get out there, right? There's pent-up demand. There is plenty of money to go around. Luxury travelers, private jets are already doing very well. Private yachts are doing very well. So it will happen. But I think data for the moment is the most important, right? And once we get there, it will boom and it will be stronger than ever before, 100% sure. Now, when it comes to business travel, exhibitions, etc., that's going to be a little longer. But again, I speak to a lot of business people here in London, and they are zoomed to death, right? They can't stand it anymore. They want to go back. They want to go back to traveling. They want to see their friends in New York, in Tokyo, in Bangkok, wherever, because nothing replaces the human interactivity, right? So that's a bit of my feeling. So what I would say, leisure travel, incredibly strong already in 22. Rates will continue to climb. Occupancies will be incredibly high. But I also expect, I've heard from a lot of hotels that MICE, the inquiries for MICE are already coming in for next year. And I expect that the last half of 22, we're going to see the start of a recovery in business travel, exhibitions, MICE, etc. That's my feeling.
Thank you.
I concur with Filip that people do have Zoom fatigue, and they would like to go and travel and meet people because there's nothing like a face-to-face meeting. But at the same time, I think COVID, as we know, has accelerated the future. And I think the future has been Zoom. I mean, like what we're doing here, Zoom can sometimes be more effective. So I used to go on sales calls to cities and, meet, say, 30 travel agents for a lunch or an evening event, or a few more, see 10 journalists at breakfast. Now we do a webinar and there are like 150 journalists, if it's a PR one from 6 different countries, and it all happens within an hour. So it's a very effective use of time. So, and people have been buying companies. So one of our guests bought Coca-Cola, two of the Coca-Cola bottlers in South America on Zoom. They hadn't seen the business. I've heard of other people who've bought hotels on Zoom as well and done joint venture partnerships. So we've learned how to manage with Zoom. So I think what that will mean is that there'll just be less business travel. There'll still be business travel. Of course, you have to travel. You have to go and see something and feel it. But I suspect the business travel will halve as a result. I couldn't agree more about pent-up demand. I mean, we've seen it. In fact, the first 4 months of this year, we've been double on 2019 in the Maldives, because obviously we have one island, one resort. And Thailand, it hasn't been so good, but we've been a little bit above last year. But the reason we've done so well here in the Maldives is that the government here have been, well, firstly, we're isolated islands, so it's conducive to travel in this context. And the fact, I think, that we're testing also helps. So people, they arrive. We also know that air travel is not that risky in terms of catching infections, because an airliner, the air is circulated 14 to 16 times. So the level of circulation is that of an ICU room. It's more than a normal hospital room or an office. An office, it's 4 to 6 times an hour. In an airliner, it's 14 to 16 times an hour. And as IATA pointed out in a recent article, when they've evaluated the statistics, they tracked very few COVID transfers of COVID to flights. And their conclusion was that you had greater chance as an individual to being struck down by lightning than catching COVID on a plane. So air travel is not that risky. In some contexts, like our context, you're met at the gate, you go into a private lounge, you go into a private float plane, you go to the resort, you're isolated in your private villa, your private beach, swimming pool, or whatever, and then you have the results, and then you're allowed to circulate. And you arrive in the Maldives with a negative test certificate. So by the time you're circulating, you've had 2 tests in the last 4 days, one very recently, and then there's a further test in day 6. So that, I think, has given people reassurance. But most importantly, it's been the government's reaction. So in terms of demand for Southeast Asia, I think there's huge demand for Southeast Asia if the government would allow people to come in. That's been the challenge, is the Thai government, the Indonesian government, the Singapore government, they've closed their destinations to travelers. What's been very nice in the Maldives is that, apart from most recently with India because of the Indian strain, the Maldives government have not discriminated on people based on where they've come from. All they've said is, come with a negative test certificate, and however bad the cases are in your country, we'll let you in. And then in our particular case, we're testing. So I think this idea of, I think demand will be led by governments allowing people to travel, as I think Lindsey touched upon as well. And I think that's the key issue. So if your country is on a green list and your governments are allowing people to travel, the travel demand, as we've seen, is better than ever. As I mentioned, Jan, Feb, March, April, double of 2019 pre-COVID levels, because it was very easy to get into the Maldives, and we were also on the green list of many nations.
Right. Thank you. Next question here. We have airline tickets are higher than before the pandemic, and do you foresee that rates in the hotels will go up as well?
Okay, as I think everybody said.
Go ahead, Lindsey. Go ahead.
No, but it's absolutely. I mean, I think that we're seeing, especially resort destinations. I mean, I think they're getting better rates in 2019. Yeah. I think we'll continue to see that. I think, as Filip mentioned, though, that the challenge is service levels. Yeah. And hotels are really challenged to get the right staff. So you're probably lucky. You probably actually have the right staffing levels, but a lot of resorts around the world don't. And that's going to create a real problem, because customers' expectations are here, and service levels are really, really suffering. But I think it'll continue to keep growing, just like home prices here in the US.
And I also think, Lindsey, it was a question that the hotels were not expecting that kind of demand, right? That quickly, especially in America, right? Where people get in a car and drive 6, 7, 8 hours to a destination to stay for the weekend, right?
Yeah.
And what we have seen in Forbes Travel Guide is that our training has gone absolutely crazy, right? We had to employ, thank God, we had to re-employ 7 or 8 of our trainers over the last 3 or 4 weeks because there's such a demand to get these employees trained, right? Because they are short of staff, indeed.
Yeah.
But that rates are continuing to go up, you know, that's a normal reaction to demand. It's the same as airlines, right? The busier it gets, the more you're going to pay.
Yeah, good.
Right.
No, great. I have nothing really to add on that. I think, you know, we were lucky we kept our host because SONEVA Fushi here, for example, has been open for 25 years. We have people who started with us then. They know our repeat guests have been coming for 20 years. Hosts are a hugely valuable asset. You know, that chef who worked with visiting chef Adoni Adoritz from Mugaritz and learned that recipe, or Martin Berasitigui and other top chefs who come to us, that's valuable knowledge that you could never retrain. So we were very lucky. We kept all our hosts. We all made sacrifices. You know, Ava and I, our salary was cut by 100%, our core layered 50%. And then like the tax rate, our lower level hosts, the atmosphere, who create the atmosphere, the first 3 months, it was a 5% reduction. And then after that, no reduction. So I think we've been quite lucky on the host side. And as you say, Filip, rates are a function of demand. And when the demand's high, of course, we're going to charge more.
Right. Next question. Thank you. What would you recommend a hotel developer knowing how COVID has changed our perception of social distancing, hygiene, and safety when building a new hotel resort?
This is not ladies first this time because I'm not here. Hotel developers.
Yeah,
Gentlemen, please.
Developers. But I think that health security will be with us for the foreseeable future in some sort of form, right? It's not going to be forever the tough conditions and the tough protocols that we have in place for the moment. But people are obviously going to be more careful for obvious reasons, right? So there will always be that element. Will designers and architects design hotels differently because of it? I am not so sure. I don't see that, actually. I don't see that. I think it's temporarily. It could be with us for another 2 or 3 years. But will changes be made? I'm not so sure. What do you think, Sonu?
I tend to agree with you. So I think it depends where the hotel is. If you can be in the open air, we know that the virus does not spread if you're asymptomatic. So if the climate is balmy, try and create as many open spaces as possible and make sure all your public areas are open space and prioritize that, because people have been locked in a box. Yeah. So this idea, we call it intelligent luxury, where we're questioning and challenging what is a luxury to the urban successful. And those things that we would focus on in the past have become much more relevant in that if you think about it, you know, the successful today are urban. They're not, they haven't inherited their wealth. They're not living in the countryside with a lot of fresh food, fresh air, space, and privacy. It's the opposite. They've been living in a box, and COVID has actually undermined the advantages of a city in terms of gatherings, community, going out to the theatre, restaurants, but it's accentuated the drawbacks of a city, which is, you know, the box, the lack of fresh air, fresh food, space. So I think as much open space as possible, just sitting outside in the open air with your feet in the sand, if that's a relevant thing, sitting and looking at the deck above, you know, the stars above, is rare for people at the moment. You know, of course, you could say create more private spaces, keep distance from people, but people are yearn community. So, you know, what we've noticed, because we're no news, no shoes, people, you know, when we reopened, it was weird because, you know, we'd had no guests for a couple of months. Our hosts were so delighted. They realized that their purpose in life was to serve other people. And even if they were financially fine and safe and they didn't have the virus, you know, physically safe, they didn't feel fulfilled in life. So when these guests came back, there was a completely different gel and bond and gel between other guests. So I mean, I remember Ava and I normally on the weekend we'll have lunch or dinner with some repeat guests. And we had a lunch that started at 2:00. It finished at 8:30. People refused to go home because it was so nice to sit around a table with 12 other people chatting and laughing, giving people a hug and sharing food and wine. So I think, people are generally gregarious social animals. And, I think if you create these separate private spaces and try and distance people, you undermine the whole point of a hotel, which is it's an anchor in the community to bring people together. So, all I can say is just try and create open spaces, try and take as many precautions as possible. Obviously, if you have a context like ours where you can test everyone on arrival and create a completely COVID-free environment, that's fantastic. But I would try and create that. But just remember that humans are humans and people want to interact with other people. And that's what creates a buzz in a hotel, a busy lobby. We talk about busy lobbies. And every hotelier's dream in an urban environment is to have a super busy, cool lobby or a super cool bar.
Thank you. I have two last questions I'm going to ask. So one is for Sonu. So this is addressed to you. You have inspired this person to become very passionate about sustainable hospitality. What is the next step for SONEVA? Where do you aspire to take the brand? How do you envision sustainability will change for the hotel industry in general? Aside from plastics, will it be carbon, supply chain management, operations, or? Thank you.
So, change. Okay, so how will sustainability evolve? It's something we've been very passionate about. So we, for example, banned branded water back in 2008. So no Vitel, no Evian, just water bottled on site. We had, with Six Senses participating at the time, we had a few little pushback. And what we found was that apart from the ecological benefits, there were, and the benefits to the guest, a healthier water because plastic is a carcinogen. The water was better because we played classical music when we were making it. We had healing crystals, and it was generally fresher than that bottle of Fiji water that had been sitting on a hot ship and then a hot storeroom for six months, mixing with plastic, etc. We found there was a financial saving, and that 18% of cost of sales, it went from 20 to 2%, our cost of water sales, that sort of gave 1 million people access to clean water. So I think this idea of where you can make a change to the way you do business, which does not affect your profitability in a bad way or the way guests perceive you, but can have a positive impact, like this water example, I think is going to be very important. We as hoteliers have to have an impact beyond our communities. Now, all our water revenues go to community projects here in the Maldives in particular, where we are eliminating the single use of plastic in local islands. And the government have now made a commitment that by 2023, there will be no single use plastic in the Maldives as a whole. And we're driving that forward with local islands and in our operations. Supply chain is, of course, very important because how do you bring in fresh food without and certain products without styrofoam boxes? So we've now reduced that considerably. There have been other alternatives, and we've been working very closely with our key suppliers. There are still some things, but we've been targeting every supplier one after the other. So we have a fantastic tea brand, but at the moment they have these plastic sachets. So we've threatened them to move to another tea brand who has a good tea, but who will be able to provide a sustainable container. And it goes down to everything like we've managed to convince one local island to stop, because in the ocean, apart from plastic bottles, number two is how do you say, diapers? Pampers. Pampers. How do you say, not the disposable diapers. So that's the second biggest contribution to plastic in the oceans. There's a local island we've managed to convince they're now using reusable Pampers. So we sell them to them at a very small subsidiary, buy it wholesaler, lose some money on it, and give it to the island. So we can't in our gift shop now have disposable Pampers. We've got to give only reusable ones. The toothpaste that we offer, the suntan lotion, the shaving cream that we offer in our gift shops have to be now of sustainable packaging. So, and it's a big effort. When you look at a hotel, there's still, we've made great efforts, but we've still got about 30, 40 items that we're working on. Our goal is that by the end of this year, any single-use plastic that comes on the island, any purchasing manager in our properties has to send me an email with a justification, supported by the general manager of the property for why they're not doing it, because that's the only way we'll get there. In terms of carbon, yes, I think we need to measure the externalities on the carbon. So there's the hospitality industry carbon calculator, which the WTTC and the International Tourism Partnership, ITP, put together many years ago. But that just covers scopes 1 and 2, what happens on site, like these light bulbs, the energy from these light bulbs. It doesn't take externalities like guests flying in, supplies coming in. So we started to measure that again in 2008, and we measure all 3 scopes of carbon, including the externalities, and then we offset it. So we actually charge 2% on the guest bill. It's a mandatory carbon levy, and that over the years has raised about $8-9 million for the SONEVA Foundation, which has given 500,000 trees in the north of Thailand, a 1.5 megawatt windmill in India, and more recently, cook stoves in Darfur and Myanmar. We know that people die a lot a year from lung asphyxiation, using firewood to just keep warm or purify their water or cook their food. And up in the north of Myanmar, some families that we're supporting spend 30% of their income on the firewood. So we give these subsidized cook stoves. We buy it for $50, sell it for $10, and it burns the wood more efficiently, no smoky rooms, half the wood consumption, so 50% reduction in purchases. When it's 30% of your income, that's a big saving 15%, and then a 60% reduction in CO2 emissions. So that's going to be important. I think green energy has to be there. We can't be using fossil fuels. So SONEVA Jani shortly will be up to 90% renewable energy at a cost that is cheaper than our diesel. So we've done a deal with a German supplier because he gets very soft funding from the German government. And at the end of the day, the cost of solar energy is a function of the capital investment multiplied by the cost of capital. So if the German supplier can get a 4% cost of capital, and in the Maldives it costs us 10% to borrow, it's better to do a PPA agreement. And that PPA agreement will be at about 13 cents per kilowatt of electricity, whereas the diesel is at 20 cents. So it's a very compelling argument. And this is not just in the Maldives. This sort of improvement over fossil fuels by just solar, not wind, solar, is relevant in about 80-90% of the world, of the planet, including the oil-producing nations like
no, I think we are out of time, my friend.
Sorry. I'm too passionate. Excuse me. Okay.
We did start 4 minutes later, so.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Sorry, I'll stop. Okay. Got the message, Filip.
I love the passion, though. This is what we need. This is what our industry needs.
It's amazing.
So I would like to ask.
It's amazing what you're doing, Sonu, and especially all the support to these communities, and especially in Myanmar, because really my heart is bleeding for the people there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like to ask just one question that combines 2 to each one of you, and it has to be like a 30-second pitch. Advice for future hotelier. What advice would you give future hotelier / what advice would you give to students in terms of personal development for a leadership position? 30-second pitch.
Very simple. With the current labor crisis, which is going to take quite a while, I think the opportunities for bright students like yourselves are amazing, both in terms of entry level in hotels, because don't forget, the crisis is not just for rank and file, it's also for management positions. So you're going to be able to enter at a higher level into the hotel, and you're going to make incredibly fast progression through the ranks if you are committed and if you are hardworking. So I think the opportunities to join the hotel industry now have never been better before.
Well said. I don't even know that I need 30 seconds. I'd say ditto, but I also would say you're gonna meet so many incredible people along the way. It sounds cliche, but definitely when you find somebody that you admire or inspires you, ask them to mentor you. I feel so lucky to have just had the ability to work alongside so many amazing people. So be curious, ask a lot of questions, never be afraid to ask questions. I think that's one flaw that we have as human beings. Sometimes we think it's going to come across making us sound ignorant. It's the most important thing you can do. Ask questions and be curious and raise your hand to take on responsibilities. Hospitality is an incredible industry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I concur with you, Lindsey. I think questions, whether you're young or a leader, in terms of leadership tips, questions are so important. Leading by questions, not statements, and listening. Deep, radical listening is, I think, key. I think in terms of leadership development, try and develop your personality, your mind, your psychology, meditation, yoga. I took up meditation and yoga too late in my life. I wish I'd started it at your age. It's benefited me a lot. I'm more nimble now than I was 15 years ago before I took up yoga. The meditation has been amazing for me as well. And I think this whole thing of psychology, you know, creating bonds with the people you work with, this idea of secure base leadership, where as a leader, you're belaying someone up the mountain and you've got the rope and you're guiding them, and they feel comfortable. They don't mind taking risks because they know that if they fall, you're holding them with the rope. So I think for leadership from that, all of those aspects that I talked about are for me the priority, and that would be my lesson to give to you, is to think about leadership from that side.
Thank you very much. And now I have just 1 minute, and I would like to take that 1 minute to conclude. First of all, I would like to conclude each one of you, for the panelists, for being authentic and for taking the time to share your insights and experiences. I have to add that our 3 panelists are longtime and very supportive members of HoteliersGuild, which is a private society of active luxury hotelier creating the industry to a round table. HoteliersGuild was founded by Frank Feller, who is a personal friend of all our panelists and is present today. You're somewhere there, Frank. A big warm thank you, Frank, for your generosity in connecting us all together so that this webinar can happen. Frank is also has also founded the Leading Hotelier, and that's with an E, women, together with Lindsey. And I'm basically I'm a co-chair lady there, and we've been collaborating on several projects to promote gender equality in our industry, which is another topic close to our hearts. That's the first thing. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Frank. Second, thank you very much to my academic assistant, Sophie Kern, because I would literally be lost without her support. Thank you, Sophie. And finally, I would like to thank to our audience. We have still 260 audience for your participation and enriching the discussion through your questions. So thank you very much, everybody. I would wish you a great morning, afternoon, and evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.